What's up everybody, Teneycke here, back with another video. And today, we're going to be talking about dwarfism. Now I did a video on this about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I didn't go into too much detail about my surgeries. I mentioned them, but I didn't go into much detail. So this video, we're going to go into more detail about what surgeries I've had, and how the recovery has been, and stuff like that. So my first major surgery was I had to get my neck fused. And I had to get my neck fused because essentially my short neck couldn't hold my average-sized big head. I have what's called delayed ossification in the vertebrae and the neck and spine. Actually, it's all over my body. So delayed ossification basically means that my bones don't turn to bone like yours. It takes mine up to years to turn into bone from cartilage. This meant my neck was really unstable because there's a little nub that stops your C1 sliding from your C2 vertebrae. But my nub wasn't very strong because it wasn't bone yet. So because that little nub wasn't bone, it was really dangerous for me to do activities. So I had to wear what's called a Minerva neck brace. And I had to wear it from when I was 14 months old to when I was 4 years old, which is when the doctors decided that they could do my surgery on my neck. The doctor that did this surgery, his name is Dr. Riley. He's one of my specialists. After this surgery was done, I had to wear what's called a halo. It was like this cage that was around my head to keep my head straight and to not put any weight on my neck. I actually have some scars. Here, I'll show you. Sorry for my bad hair, but if you guys can see right there, there's a hole. There's a mark. And that mark, and it's on all 4 of my corners. Right here, it's right there. Not that noticeable on this side. But what it is they actually drilled into my head with screws and to secure the brace. That brace was actually so sturdy that they could actually pick me up by it. So my neck took about a year after that to recover. And then I had to wear an aspen collar until I was 9 years old. The aspen collar just provided extra comfort and took a little bit of the weight off my neck until I had even more bone. October 28th, 2014, at age 9 and in grade 4, I had 8 plates put in my knees. And they actually got the name because they look like 2 washers. It looks like they welded them together and then they bolt in through the holes. And so it actually looked like a figure 8. The reason I needed to have this surgery was to stop me from forming knock knees. So for those of you that don't know, this is what knock knees look like. Well, those plates stopped the growth of the bone on the inside so that my outside bone could grow to the right length, so that they were equal, because my inside bones were growing at a faster pace than my outside, so they needed to stop that and make them equal. So now, my legs are perfectly straight. So these plates actually stayed in my knees for about 2.5 years. They were actually, I think, supposed to make it to 3 years, but I had to get them out early because they were really bothering me. What happened is I have these 8 plates. They kind of bulged out of my knee a bit, and if I touched them on anything or hit them on anything, it caused excruciating pain. So it took me about 3.5 months to fully regain my walking on my own with no assistance. So about a year later, on February 11th of 2015, I was in grade 5 and I had to have my hip surgery. Now my hip surgery was called double femoral derotational hip osteotomies. So the reason I needed to have this surgery was because my hips, they kept sliding out of the socket. And so what they did is when they cut off the head of the femur and moved it over, they moved it so that it fit perfectly. But at the same time of them moving the head of my femur, they rotated it as well. And once everything was in the right place, they held it together with screws and rods. And they did this on both my hips at the same time. This was a really hard recovery for me, both mentally and physically, because with my knees already bothering me, my hips was a long recovery as well, but it didn't give me my full mobility back. Going into the surgery, I thought that I would come out and I would be able to move more and run around lots more. And it would increase my mobility a lot. But when I came out and got fully recovered, it actually decreased my mobility. And this was not expected, and the doctors couldn't have figured this out. Not that something went wrong, but it just didn't do what it was supposed to do. And so this caused me to lose a lot of my mobility. I couldn't run around, I couldn't play with friends. And so I was pretty much housebound for the next year and a half because, like I said, I couldn't do much running. And what happened was, before I had my surgery, my hip kept sliding out of the socket, but the odd time when I'd run, it would feel like my hip, even though they cut it and moved it, it felt like it would slide out of the socket and pop. So every couple, I'd say almost every 20 steps, you'd hear a pop, 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 and it would cause pain. And so after about a year and a half of that and me constantly complaining about my hips, I was losing a lot of energy and I was losing a lot of mobility. And so after constantly complaining to my doctors about my hips and even complaining to my parents, everyone kind of realized this isn't doing Caden any good. In the long run, it'll do him good. The longer they stay in, the longer they'll work. But it's not giving him anything right now. And so what they did is, after having my hips in for a year and a half, they decided to take them out early. And in that, they decided to take out my knees as well. So they took out the A plates and my hip and my screws and rods in my hips as well. And I have never felt so great. And yeah, it was a rough recovery because it was 8 weeks no weight bearing minimum, because my knees and my hips have freshly been taken apart essentially. And so it was definitely a hard go at the start, but I gained so much more mobility back. I could run again. I could play basketball with my parents. I could play basketball with my friends. I actually could keep up with my friends. For a little person, I could keep up with them. But it was great. I had my mobility back. It was awesome. So I actually have another surgery coming up very soon. Well, within the next 2 to 3 years, possibly earlier, if needed. With this surgery, it's on my back. And I mentioned in the last video, or I mentioned in the video before, anyway, I mentioned in the video when I talked about my dwarfism that my back is curved. And it like my back looks like an S. Here, for those of you that haven't seen my last video, this is my back. And this is an average back. So there's a bit of a difference. So that curve slowly will get worse and worse. So my curve, I think, is at 68 degrees right now, but it's slowly getting worse. And as it gets worse, it cuts off my spinal cord. So once that curve gets bad, they have to fuse it. But what they're trying to do is they're waiting for me to grow as much as possible and get as much bone as possible, so that when they fuse it, it's going to be a strong back. But that wraps it up for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to smash that like button. Comment down below if you'd like to see more, and share with your friends and family. Peace!